Welcome to the Lady Landlords podcast, where we empower women to gain financial independence through real estate investing. I'm your host, Becky Nova, founder of Lady Landlords. If you're ready to buy, manage, and grow your real estate portfolio, then let's get started.
If I could go back and restart my entire real estate investing portfolio, here are the 3 things that I would focus on. Welcome back to today's episode of the Lady Landlords podcast. Today, I have been doing a lot of reflecting over the past 6 years that I have been investing in real estate. Reason for that, if you are a regular listener to our podcast or in our Lady Landlords Facebook group, you will know that our Lady Landlords headquarters is actually moving, and that's because I am going to be moving. We are expecting our first baby this fall, and there's been a lot of transitions with moving into now a single family house. We are going to be leaving the house hacking that we've been doing for years now. And it's been just really interesting, not only just changing areas, but also just entering really this new chapter that we're going to be going towards. So because of that and reflecting, I really wanted to share a couple ideas of what you could do if you were still looking to get that very, very first rental. This is the place you want to be. Also, if you are listening to this, as we always release new episodes on new Tuesdays, tonight we actually are having an entire masterclass all about how to really get started with that very first rental property. So if you have not, make sure to go look in the show notes. There's a link I'll put down there so that way you can join us tonight. Even if it's now too late for you to be able to join, which means you've missed all the emails in our newsletter, and you've also missed the different messages that have been sent through our Facebook community. Don't worry, if you register by today, you will still be able to get the replay, okay? So even if you can't make it tonight, it's still a great opportunity to get in there. But let's talk about these 3 tips of the things that I wish I had known or wish that I had done when I first started investing in real estate back in 2018. The top thing that I want to mention is actually probably the most common response that I hear from even other successful real estate investors when they're asked the question, oh, what would you have done differently? Or what do you wish that you had known when you first got started? And my answer to that is starting sooner. Okay. I bought our first rental property. I would have been 35? So a little bit later in the game for a lot of other people that have been in this for a while, or it even bought a first primary home. The first investment property that we bought, the intention of it was actually for us to be able to live in. At the time, I really wasn't thinking about investing. My goal was really just to lower my cost of living in New York City, where we were living at the time, and to say, hey, how can I get some income coming in? What can I do to really supplement these expensive mortgages, these expensive properties that we were looking at in that New York area? So I definitely feel that I fall under that accidental landlord category because of that, because my intention really was not to actually invest. I simply wanted to make sure that I was not going to be house poor where I was spending my money and it was going always just towards a mortgage, but yet I couldn't enjoy anything else. So I bought a duplex as our first property in Westchester, New York. And that was really where things got kicked off. But looking back on it now, after having 16 rentals and thinking about it after all these years, still getting started sooner to me would have been the place that I wish that I'd been able to do. One of the main reasons for that is because no matter how many books you read, how many podcasts you listen to, you're never going to know anything. We just closed on now our 17th rental property, and there were things that popped up in that deal. And if you go back and listen to some of the Lady Landlords podcasts that I had done, some of the episodes I did in May and June, I shared a lot about the new issues that popped up for that property that I had never seen in any of the other properties that I bought. What's interesting is, yes, we want to go into things prepared. We want to have knowledge. We want to have that education because we still want to have that foundation. Yes, we don't want to go into anything absolutely blindly. And I'm going to talk about that in my next 2 tips of what I would do if I were to start my portfolio over. But I think it's incredibly important to still actually go out and do the thing, the experience, putting it into place to really be able to say, what does this look like? And go through that firsthand. I'm sorry, but you're never going to get that from a book. You're never going to get that from a podcast. There are things that'll come up, and every single deal that I have done has been completely different. Really, this last one that we just picked up, I really kind of dubbed as the easiest, most difficult closing I've ever had because everything was running so smooth. There were not like huge problems, but they were just all these little like nuanced things that really were just complicated. That is completely different than some of the properties that I bought earlier that just had these major issues that it was like, is the deal going to fall apart over this? This, I didn't feel that way, but they were just things that unnecessarily complicated the process that had come up in that 17th property. But still, I would have never learned those things, never known them if I didn't actually go through that. What's interesting is my husband Emilio and I laugh when we go through kind of the buying process now, because every time we buy a new property, there are new questions that we ask. There are new things that we look for. Things have become much more of a priority for us to look at when we're going through evaluating if we're going to buy a rental property compared to what we were looking at when we were on our second, our third, our fourth property. And to be honest, it's just because we never knew that those were things that we should even look for. So we laugh when always we say like, okay, for some reason, I don't know why this is, we tend to buy more during the summer. So one of the first things that we always do is like check the heat, because I can't tell you how many times, even though we have an inspection, even though everything seems to be working right, all of a sudden we close during the summer, we get to October, November, December, and then all of a sudden there ends up being something going on with our heating system. So that's something that we like double, triple check just because it's something that we've had issues with before. We know what to look for in a very different way. And to be honest, the only way that you're going to know those things is it becomes from that experience. That was really something with this last deal that we just closed on now at the end of June. I remember talking to my mother, because if there's one person that I get to vent to that will actually just listen, I got to say it's my mom. And I remember calling her, and I was probably speaking, 100 miles a minute here about like, well, this was a problem. This was a problem. This is a problem. And I got to make this phone call to go get this fixed. And she was just like, you are so lucky. And I was like, what do you mean? And she said, most people wouldn't know who to call, how to handle this, how to get these things done. But these are things that you're actually in a position to be able to take care of. And to be honest, the only reason I can do that is because of the other experience that I've had. Okay. So yes, when you go into real estate, you need to be able to go in and make sure that you do still have your understanding of what needs to be done and some foundational knowledge. And you need to have a good team around you and a good team of experts around you to help guide you through this process. But there is absolutely nothing that you could do to prepare yourself to actually go through this besides going through this. So, like I said, I really hope that you're able to join us tonight as we are focusing on really how to make sure that you are bringing in at least $500 on your first rental property. So if that is something that you're interested in, like I said, go down to the show notes and make sure to register for that. Even if you can't join us live tonight, you will be able to still get that limited replay. Now, the second thing that I wish I knew when I first built my portfolio was understanding creative financing better. When we bought that first property, I will never forget the closing. One, because it was my first closing on the very first property I bought. Two, I will never forget it because it was absolutely atrocious. It was a 4-hour long closing. There were problems with paperwork. Our attorney didn't really seem to know what she was doing. The title company, I would never, ever refer. There were just so many issues from like an administrative perspective. I personally have never been to a closing that involved that much cursing as what happened in that first one. And not just for me, but a lot of other people at that table. But there were a lot of things that were done incorrectly. And I've always been a person that makes sure to read what it is that I am signing. So because of that, it was a place where I was able to catch a lot of those mistakes or at least inquire on why something looked different or why something kind of didn't make sense. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to get a lot of answers. So this closing was 4 hours long, tons of cursing, tons of things just holding us back from actually being able to get to that closing table. But at the very end of that closing, I will never forget that I got a check. I was like, I just signed my life away. I just gave all my life savings here. Why am I getting a check? And they're like, oh, well, for the tenants that are there, you get that check because they're people that are living there. And I was like, just like that, just on day one, already, I am getting paid. This is awesome. I have to do this again. It probably wasn't even a week before I called my realtor, I called my mortgage lender back and said, this is amazing. I want to do this again. I was already hooked by that very first property, by that very first check that I even got at the closing table. And I said, that's it. I'm excited. This is something that I want to be able to pursue. I need to buy another rental property. And everybody that I called was just kind of like, no, like you can't do that. Like, this is way too soon. You need to save. It's probably going to take you a good couple of years, especially in an area like New York where everything is, $500,000 plus to be able to purchase. And was just kind of told like, no, sit back, relax, like wait, save, scrimp together some funds, and then kind of, we'll talk in a year or two and kind of see where you go from there. And I really didn't like that as an answer. By that point in time, I was already going to some real estate meetups. I was already networking with some other people and finding my way through that. Lady Landlords did still not exist at that point in time. So unfortunately, I could not go and ask our amazing community. But it was a place that, even with the networking that I was doing, I was talking to people that were closing on multiple properties in the same month, sometimes in the same week. I had people that were just scaling and being able to buy larger projects and being able to buy faster and being able to bring in more profit, more rents. And I remember just sitting there being like, there's no way that everybody is just sitting around here, just saving 25% down. Or I guess, pre-pandemic, fine. Pre-pandemic, you were able to find some people that were able to put down, that were accepting a 15% down for an investment property, or 20% was a little more common. Really, after 2020, 25% became really that gold standard. But even at that, $500,000 house at 20% down, you're still looking at $125,000. So that's a lot of money, especially after I just bought a house that took me a while to be able to save for, and that I was doing owner-occupied financing where I only had to put down 5%. So to me, that seemed impossible. But if I'm seeing all these other people doing these things, to me, well, there's got to be a way. Once I started diving into understanding financing better, I realized that there are so many different ways to be able to make a deal work. To be honest, the financing is usually not the most difficult part to secure capital. And I feel like so many of our members in Lady Landlords get hung up on that space. Well, I need to have this money. I need to have this money. What's really cool in life is money is kind of everywhere. And financing a good deal, right? Saying a good deal as in just something cash flowing, something that actually will make money. A lot of people want to participate in a way where they can actually make money. I think that's kind of something that most of us are looking for. So diving into creative financing and understanding just how financing works, even traditional financing, getting a much better idea on how that works, how that process actually goes through is incredibly important to be able to do. And that's something that I wish I had done earlier on, rather than just sitting there being like, okay, I guess I just have to wait to save another $100,000. I guess I have to wait to save 25%. I guess I have to keep my full-time job that I hated because, I need a W-2 to be able to invest. None of those things are true. None of them are. There are so many different ways to be able to do it. We've gotten into a lot more creative financing between either private money lenders, between seller financing. There are so many cool ways to do it. And I think what's important is not to be kind of the Jill of all trades, not to understand kind of how every single one of them works in depth, but to really start to identify which strategies and which financing are going to be best for you and to become the experts in those, right? So coming up on Tuesday, August 26th, I'm going to be doing a deep dive into creative financing. And I'm going to just present to you, ladies, about 15 different ways that you can actually finance your deals outside of just a traditional lender. And I think this will be really, really helpful to have so many women be able to realize that they don't need to keep waiting to save, and that they don't have to get stuck in this cycle of buying and saving and buying and saving in order to be able to buy rental properties, because you don't. There's so many different ways, and there's so many other people out there. And all because other people are doing it does not mean that they are smarter than you. It does not mean that they have better connections. It does not mean that they have more money than you. But it should show you that if other people can do it, you can too. So I'll also drop the link. We're not really promoting that right now, but if you want to get on the wait list for when we do promote that, feel free to click that link for our deep dive session into multiple ways to creatively finance your deals and stop that buy, save cycle. But understanding financing makes deals go faster, smoother. It's also helped me be able to win accepted offers over other properties. I don't have to be the highest number. I don't have to be the person willing to pay the most. I just have to be the person that has to have the best terms and the right price. So that has saved me just tens of thousands of dollars over the years. And I'm really excited to share some of those options with you ladies. But I do encourage you to start thinking about what are other ways that you can fund deals than just sitting there saying, I guess I have to use my personal savings. The third option of what I would recommend, and what I wish I had gone back and done at the very beginning of starting my portfolio, was really understanding deal analysis. That first property, I lucked out. I just don't know how else to say that. I incredibly lucked out. I knew what was important to me, and I will thank the mortgage broker that I used for that specific first deal. But because he was really able to help break down some of those numbers there. But I really didn't look beyond the numbers of, okay, here's how much the mortgage is going to cost me. Here's what rent comes in from the other unit. Therefore, this would be what would be left over. That was it. That was the only calculation I'd done on that. And to be honest, I could have absolutely lost my shirt on that. It didn't include anything like maintenance, right? There wasn't much of a conversation about how taxes increase. Wasn't in conversation about the changes that could happen in insurance. There was no kind of long-term projections. There was no thought process on what happens over time with properties. How am I recouping my money? It just really came down to, and I remember one of the questions that lender had asked me was, really, what am I paying now for where I currently lived, right? The place before I bought this house. And kind of said, well, are you willing to pay a little bit more and you want to increase really what your lifestyle looks like? Do you want to kind of keep your payments the same or really decrease it? My husband, in one way or another, we were actually very lucky when at the time we were living in a 6th-floor walk-up in the Bronx. 6th-floor walk-up. Okay. So imagine trying to do like leg day at the gym and still have to bring home groceries or laundry, or do laundry day where you still have to carry those things up 6 flights of stairs. Because of that, though, we actually had very cheap rent. It was not a great neighborhood. It was not, the most perfect apartment for us, but that was really where we started. And that was a place that we called home for many, many years. But what that allowed us to do is keep our cost of living down for those few years, which really helped us save. So at that point, we had actually said to the lender, like, hey, we're looking for a little bit of an upgrade in our lifestyle. We wanted some outdoor space. We wanted something green. We wanted a little bit of a safer neighborhood, those types of things. So because of that, we were actually willing to increase what we paid every single month. What worked out, though, was the duplex that we found. And this is why, kind of looping this back into the first bullet I kind of gave you, ladies, is why it's so important to kind of dive into it, because every deal is going to be completely different. The property that we ended up finding, it was a duplex, right? So there's 2 units in it. We would be living in one, renting out the other. What was interesting about this property was that it had a 1-bedroom on the bottom floor, which then had a backyard space. But upstairs was in its own duplex, right? So its own interior staircase where it was 3 beds, 2 baths. Well, that now was huge. That apartment upstairs, even though it didn't have backyard space or outdoor space, was going to be able to command a much higher rent than the first floor because it was only 1 bedroom. But it was just my husband and I. We didn't actually need any other space. If that was reversed, this wouldn't have been maybe as good of a fit for us because we would have then been on the top floor. And then, yes, there would have been that amazing duplex downstairs, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and also backyard space. We could have gotten great rent for it, but it didn't give us the thing that we wanted, which was our own outdoor space. So looking into that, it really made a difference. And every place you're going to look at has a different setup. So there were other places that we saw that had 2 bedrooms over a 4 bedroom. Well, we would have been paying more for that for a 2 bedroom when we didn't necessarily need that space. So you really, especially if you're house hacking, you need to be able to start looking into those deals. If you're not house hacking and you understand your numbers, that's where you can really kind of look at, like, what am I actually going to get for rent with that 2 bedroom compared to that 1 bedroom? What is that outdoor space going to look like? How is that going to impact my rents? All of those different pieces come into place. But since we were able to take the smaller unit because it was just the 2 of us needing the 1 bedroom, and it gave us the backyard space that we really wanted, we were able to rent out that larger unit. That larger unit itself covered the mortgage. So we actually were able to decrease even our cost of living compared to that tiny little rate that we were paying for that South Bronx apartment in a 6-floor walk-up. That made a huge difference within that deal analysis. So like I said, we completely lucked out on that space, but that's not something that we can always kind of replicate. But I encourage you to understand that deal analysis because we missed out on a lot of the other numbers that were incredibly important with this. Any type of maintenance, vacancy, capital expenditures, right? Your larger ticket items, roofs, parking lots, things like that with the larger upgrades that need to be done. All of that should really be in that deal analysis. And I find deal analysis to be so important because those are the things that we need to be looking into before we buy property, okay? It really should not be something that we say, okay, hey, I bought this. Am I going to make money or am I not going to buy this? No, if you are doing that, you're doing this backwards. And I think deal analysis is going to be what's going to give you the confidence to understand how you can move forward. Without deal analysis, to be honest, you shouldn't be starting sooner. That's the one thing that I feel like you need to understand your basic math, your basic numbers, and what's also important to you. The number that I'm looking for from a rental property is going to be different than the number that you want. A good deal to me is going to be different than a good deal to you. And even for me, over the years, what a good deal is actually has changed, and it will for you as well. So getting really good with understanding your numbers at the very beginning is going to be a huge asset as you continue to move forward within real estate investing. So, like I said, if I could wave this magic wand, go back and rebuild my portfolio, those are the 3 things that I would have done differently. Hopefully, I'll be seeing many of you joining us tonight for our masterclass on how to bring in at least $500 with your first rental property. Once again, go down below in the show notes in the comments. You'll be able to see the link there to register. Thank you so much for joining me today. Please make sure to hit that subscribe button so you do not miss the next episode of the Lady Landlords podcast. We release new episodes every single Tuesday. So I will see you again next week. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Lady Landlords podcast. If you're feeling stuck in your real estate investing journey, visit lady-landlords.com to book a 15-minute orientation call with me and see if you're ready to join our mentorship program. Or you can subscribe to our newsletter and join our Facebook group for exclusive real estate investing tips and offers. Invest with confidence. Become a Lady Landlord today.